The following program was produced by a community producer.
Hi, welcome everyone to Community Conversations, sponsored by the Malden Community Coalition. The Malden Community Coalition is a group of nonprofits and ordinary Maldonians who are involved in volunteer efforts and efforts to make our community better. And we're having this community conversation tonight with Shaan Chatterjee, who is Chatterjee. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. It's all right. I have a lot of Banerjee cousins.
Okay, we'll kill that in post-production.
Right,
anyway,
sounds
so we're here with Shaan Chatterjee, and he's an immigration lawyer. And we're here to learn a little bit more about what it's like to practice immigration law in an immigrant-heavy community such as Malden. Shaan, how did you get involved in immigration law?
Well, I got interested in immigration law during the first Trump presidency, which immigration lawyers are now referring to Trump 1.0. During the chaos that was the child separation policy. And I didn't know what I wanted to do after law school, but I knew I wanted to do something that involved civil rights in a way that intersected with racial justice. And during the Trump presidency, it became clear to me, at least, that immigration policy in the U.S. was being weaponized as a form of ethnic cleansing, particularly against the Latinx community.
Okay.
So that's why I thought it was a good way for me to use my legal skills to advocate for my social values.
Okay. What kinds of classes do you take in law school if you want to be an immigration lawyer?
That is a great question, because when I was in law school, immigration law was seen as this boring sort of bureaucratic administrative law and not a civil rights adjacent field. But I definitely recommend taking immigration law if your law school offers it. Schools like Northeastern now have immigration law clinics, which I can't emphasize enough are so great and a great way to gain not only knowledge of substantive legal immigration law, but also to sharpen your interpersonal skills in the context of advocating for the immigrant community and immigrant clients.
Now, does it help? Obviously, it would help to have languages other than English under your belt if you want to be an immigration lawyer. What would you say are the most common languages that immigration lawyers in the Boston area practice in other than English?
In the Boston area, Spanish and Portuguese.
Spanish and Portuguese,
yeah.
Okay. And that varies then depending on the place within the U.S. that people...
Certainly, and even the neighborhood within Boston.
Okay.
You know, in Mattapan, it would probably be Haitian Creole.
Okay. And so obviously as an immigration lawyer, the kinds of things you do for your day job are helping people get their legal status adjusted. Like walk us through what a typical day in your job is like.
Absolutely. So I should preface this by saying immigration law is very vast, and it can include a variety of different things. There are business immigration attorneys that help people get green cards through their employment. I don't do business immigration. My practice is primarily deportation defense, asylum. There are other defenses to deportation, such as juvenile visas, and also family-based immigration, the quintessential example being a marriage-based green card application. So the latter is what my day-to-day job usually focuses on, but I'd say that the task that I'm usually working on is preparing the evidence in support of someone's asylum application, working with that person to draft an affidavit in support of that affidavit, and then preparing them for either their asylum interview or their asylum hearing in front of an immigration judge if they're in deportation proceedings.
Okay. And what are some of the kinds of reasons that people apply for asylum in the U.S.?
There are a lot of reasons, but I would say the primary one is that they're afraid to go back to their home country. And the standard for asylum is that you have to show what's called a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country. And the Supreme Court has interpreted that as at least a 10% chance of persecution if you go back. Persecution is specifically defined as harm on account of your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And that's the ground that has the most area for interpretation and for creativity as a lawyer.
Creativity is not something I would have normally thought of as a as a legal skill, but tell me about legal creativity.
Well, legal creativity is an essential part of the job because there are many terms and areas within immigration law that are not well defined, that are diffuse, and that is challenging in its own way, but it also provides an opportunity for advocates to push the boundaries of the law, to include protections for groups or individuals whom traditionally the law has not been applied to. There are many examples of groups that did not have explicit protection under asylum law before, but this particular social group has come to include sexual orientation, transgender identity, certain professions, and even cisgender identity is something that was not explicitly included in the asylum laws, but due to litigation and the hard work of a lot of immigration lawyers has finally come to be recognized.
So are you saying, for example, that that women who face high risks of violence against them because they're women will apply for asylum in the U.S.?
They can, especially in the New England area or the First Circuit, which is a sub-jurisdiction under federal law, because now gender and nationality are recognized as a ground for asylum.
Okay, okay. And with the second Trump administration's changes to how gender and sex are recognized in law, has that changed how you practice law in the last few weeks?
Well, it's changed certain logistical things in terms of advising people about what kind of passports they can get, because the State Department has implemented the Trump administration's sole recognition of cisgender biological identity. But in terms of asylum law, we haven't changed our practice because there's case law that precedes Trump 2.0 and firmly recognizes the cognizability of gender-based persecution claims, and there's no way Trump can change that.
Okay, so let me take the words you used down a little bit and see if I understood you right. So you're saying that the courts understand that there's a history of decisions in First Circuit courts, which are the New England federal courts,
Yes.
that recognize that many different kinds of people can make a claim of gender-based persecution
Yes.
in their home country. And so someone who is being persecuted because of their gender in a country elsewhere in the world can apply for asylum to come to Massachusetts and stay here because they fear what's going to happen to them if they stay in their home country.
That's an accurate summary.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to kind of bring that down because
I appreciate that.
You know,
I have a propensity towards legalese.
Right.
It's good to have someone.
Yeah. So, what do you like about practicing immigration law?
My favorite part of my job is interacting with clients and working with them to prepare an asylum case. And it's really a dynamic that I've come to cherish. I can't do it without the client. Maybe they can't do it without me, but I look at it as, I look at myself as more of a guide in a morass, in a system that is designed for immigrants to fail. And so working with clients so that they can help me help them, putting together their story, helping them explain why they would be persecuted if they go back to their home country, and certainly winning an asylum case makes all of the adversity worth it.
How long does a typical asylum or immigration case take to litigate from the first time you meet someone to when they win their asylum claim?
That's an excellent question because it's changed so much in just the last few years. The Biden administration actually created what are called rocket dockets in the immigration court that have expedited the processing of claims so much that Biden actually required people to have their full case ready when 180 days from their first court date. That's generally not considered enough time to prepare an asylum case.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about getting evidence from your home country, getting it translated, writing an affidavit, getting letters of support from witnesses. Trump obviously has not abolished these dockets because they make it easier to deport people. They're still in place. So people that are on these expedited dockets have anywhere from, there's the rocket docket of 180 days, there's a 360-day one. These are cases where we have to work very, very fast.
And you have to email back and forth to the home country and get all of the testimony together to prove that someone is in danger in their home country.
Yes, it frequently requires that process, and there's only so much our clients can do to access that information.
Right, because if they don't have the email addresses or the phone numbers for the people who can support them, then it gets harder to prove their case.
Certainly, and often for evidence at hospitals, at police stations, you have to go in person, and so there's no way around it.
Okay. But you said that when the judgment is finally issued and someone's granted asylum, that there's a great feeling of satisfaction.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an extremely cathartic moment for someone that's suffered persecution in their home country only to be persecuted on account of their immigration status here.
Right.
And it's beautiful to witness it and be a part of it.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what do you wish more Americans who were born here knew about recent immigrants and immigrant experiences? And in a place like, we were talking before the show about how in a place like Malden, there are a lot of people who have immigration in their family histories. But immigration has changed a lot since the 1880s or 1920s, when most of Malden's Italian American or Irish Americans' grandparents would have come here. What's immigration like now, recently, to the U.S.?
I would say I wish people understood that there's so many immigrants that do everything right and are still punished by the immigration system for being an immigrant. You get your visa, you enter the U.S. lawfully, you don't commit any crimes, and then ICE comes and picks you up and puts you in detention. And just because you requested asylum, which is legal. You entered the U.S. lawfully. I do a lot of ICE detention work, and I can't tell you how many people I've encountered that had visas. Either Customs or Border Protection or ICE found out that they wanted to request asylum and put them in immigration detention for following all of the procedures, all of the legal avenues created by Congress. You know, a common refrain you hear is, well, these people aren't doing it the right way. My ancestors did it the right way. Well, there was no wrong way. There was just, you had a 6-minute medical or 6-second medical at Ellis Island and they'd let you through. It wasn't until groups started immigrating from East Asia and China and India and more recently Latin America that the process became more restrictive, and we have plenty of people nowadays that are doing everything the right way and are still being punished for it. And I wish there was just more of a collective recognition that even if you do things the right way, the immigration system is still designed for you to fail.
Why do you think that is?
Well,
I mean, the U.S. talks about itself as like a nation of immigrants.
Sure.
And you know, we could modify that with talking about the history of enslavement that brought so many Americans here. But why is it that if we talk about ourselves as a nation of immigrants, if people in Malden talk about ourselves as an immigrant city, then why is it so hard for immigrants to build lives here?
Well, I think it's notable that immigration enforcement is selectively applied differently across different national groups. For example, Ukrainians fleeing persecution in Ukraine were met with open arms and were allowed to enter the southern border illegally and were granted parole and were fast-tracked for a pathway to permanent residence in a way that not even Afghans fleeing persecution by the Taliban were. There was some recognition for Afghans who worked for the U.S. government, but it was far more restrictive compared to the Ukrainian one. And certainly for Central and South Americans, there's no comparable parole program in place. And so you really have to ask, why are there different sets of rules for people of different races?
Okay. So you think the history of American racism has something to do with how immigration law is applied?
The history and the present of American racism.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Is there anything else about recent immigrant experiences besides this fact that you can do everything right and still get picked up? are there ways that immigration has changed since you started practicing immigration law, 6 or 7 years ago?
Yes, there are, in that my advice to people has definitely changed in terms of whether people should pursue their claims or should try to get their deportation case dismissed and lay low and avoid enforcement. During the Biden administration, there were people with claims that I didn't consider particularly strong, but I thought should just go for it because it wouldn't get any easier for them. Now that Trump is president again, I'm finding myself advising people to not necessarily pursue their claims and either wait for a better administration or a better time, or to find a different avenue to pursue lawful status in the United States.
Okay. So with all of these difficult situations you're describing under the current administration, I'm not a lawyer. What can I and my non-lawyer friends do to support people that we know who we know to be immigrants or that we suspect to be immigrants in our neighborhoods?
Well, there are a lot of ways in which non-lawyers can help immigrants in their immigration processes. And I think number one is English proficiency. A huge problem encountered by my clients is that they don't understand the documents that immigration has given to them regarding their case, because legally, immigration doesn't have to translate these documents to them. And so they don't know when their immigration court hearing is, they don't know when their interview date is, they don't know when their ICE check-in is. So if you have any proficiency in their language, if you're able to explain just what their documents say, that provides a tremendous amount of help, more than I think a lot of non-lawyers can appreciate. So especially with people that are proficient in Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Arabic, you can provide a lot of help to your neighbors. And just starting a friendly conversation and asking if you can be of any help is a great place to start.
So being neighborly then?
To say the least,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
it's a good starting point.
Just introduce yourself and say hello in the mornings and make friends.
Just be a good person.
Okay, okay. Some people who are watching this who are immigrants and have some English language proficiency may be scared about what's going on right now. For our neighbors who are immigrants and who are scared, whether or not they have appropriate legal status, what are the things that they should know and that they should share with their friends who are immigrants to help keep them safe?
Absolutely. There are a few key points that I want to reiterate to people. And number one is that even if you're a non-citizen, you have rights under the Constitution and under Massachusetts state law, and that includes the right to remain silent. You don't have to open the door to ICE, and you don't have to talk to them. ICE warrants aren't real warrants. They're signed by other ICE officers. They have no weight under the Fourth Amendment for searches and seizures. So if ICE comes knocking, don't open the door, and the best thing to do is don't talk to them. If you're out in public, don't tell them that you're a non-citizen. Don't carry your passport around because they can confiscate it and use it as evidence of alienage. So definitely do not talk to ICE. Invoke your right to silence and invoke your right to an attorney. Even as a non-citizen, you have those rights. Another common problem I find is that I get so many clients that were defrauded by what are called notarios. People holding themselves out to be legal professionals but are not, that charge a lot of money. They promise people a green card, and they end up messing up the case. The client has spent thousands of dollars. They come to me asking me what went wrong, well, and what can I do to get help now? And I have to break it to them that their money has gone to waste and they have to start all over. I know that going to an actual attorney seems scary and expensive, but I want to plug a lot of the great legal services, nonprofits in the area, including Greater Boston Legal Services. There are attorneys that can help you for no charge. Another piece of advice I'd like to give people is everyone has to work, including non-citizens, and you may not have your work authorization yet, but I implore you, do not use someone else's Social Security number. If you use a false Social Security number that belongs to a U.S. citizen, this can bar you from any sort of legal status for the rest of your life. The consequences are very severe. If you have an accountant, get an ITIN number for your taxes. But do not use someone else's social security number. It's not worth it. Another piece of advice I'll give is regarding criminal proceedings. You should always make sure you know the immigration consequences of your decisions in your criminal case before you agree to anything. In Massachusetts, there's a disposition to cases called a continuance without a finding, which is usually the result if the judge gives you probation. Under state law, this does not constitute a conviction, but under immigration law, it does. And most criminal defense attorneys know that now, but I highly recommend that you consult with your criminal defense attorney and potentially an immigration attorney as well before agreeing to anything, because I've gotten so many clients that have continuances without a finding on their record. They didn't think it would be a conviction, but it is for immigration purposes, and that bars them from getting a green card. So really make sure you don't agree to anything you don't understand. And the last thing I'll plug is undocumented people in Massachusetts are eligible to get their driver's licenses now. I highly recommend that, especially because I get so many clients that are referred to ICE because they were charged with driving without a license, which is a crime in Massachusetts. And if you go up to places like New Hampshire and Maine, where law enforcement works very closely with ICE, the law enforcement's not going to hesitate to refer you to ICE for driving without a license. It's a very common way for people to get picked up by ICE, and it does result in a criminal charge. So if you're living in Massachusetts, please take advantage of the new mobility law. Try to get your driver's license. You do not need proof of lawful status or work authorization to get it. The last thing I'll say is, under Massachusetts law, ICE has no authority to detain people just for immigration-related purposes. There's a case, Lund v. Commonwealth, in which the Supreme Judicial Court held that state law enforcement can't detain people just because there's an ICE detainer. So we live in a state in which the rights of immigrants are recognized, and everyone who lives in this state should definitely take advantage of it while it still exists.
Thank you for your clarity about the ways that Massachusetts law protects immigrants. It's not just federal law that immigrants have to work with, but also Massachusetts thinks about immigrants in particular ways that it sounds like are often more friendly to immigrants than the federal system.
Yes, I'd say that's
okay. Okay. So for people who are watching this, I have one final question for you. What is the best way that ordinary people can stay up to date on changes in immigration policy and immigration law?
Excellent question. So there's an organization called the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which takes very legally complex changes in policy, such as new regulations and new Supreme Court decisions, and explains them in layman's terms. Okay. So it's known as AILA. I highly recommend following AILA to get more explanation and dissection into what is sometimes a scarily complex system, and can gain a more simplified understanding.
Okay, so AILA is really the best organization to look at their website about.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can find out about a bunch of other great advocacy groups through AILA as well.
Okay, and are there advocacy groups that are specifically for people who are born American citizens who want to support immigrants?
That is a great question. I'm sure there are. I don't know on any off the top of my head.
Okay.
But
sorry to stump you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you know, it was bound to happen eventually. But I think Boston specifically has so many great opportunities for lawyers and non-lawyers to help the immigration community. And one of the silver linings of the Trump administration 2.0 is that it's really mobilized advocacy for immigration. So I do think that those opportunities exist.
The Malden Community Coalition, one of our member organizations is the Mass Alliance of Portuguese Speakers, which has an office in Everett. And when I spoke to their representative who came to our first meeting, he said that they would be happy to get volunteers who wanted to work with people who spoke Portuguese to help them get more established.
That's great to know.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shaan. This has been really informative. I really appreciate your answers, and thank you for joining us tonight. We will continue our conversation more after the cameras go off, but for right now, I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
All right.